these lands, and I'm glad to be here with you all. I will be your MC today. But before I go any further, I would like to welcome our Vice Chairman for the Viejas Band of Kumeyaay Indians, the Honorable Victor Woods.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. On behalf of the Viejas tribal community, I'd like to thank everyone for coming to the Tribal 9 EPA conference. Sponsored by the EPA, it's very much an honor for us to welcome you to our community. Very quickly, I would like to do a blessing, and with your help, I would like for you to stand at this time and join me. Creator, we give thanks for this blessed new day. We ask that you continue to guide us towards compassion and wisdom so that we may do right by others. We give thanks for the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, and this sacred land that we walk upon. Grandfather, we ask for protection from the negative thoughts, ideals, and judgment others may project upon us or that we may project upon others. Grandfather, we also ask for protection while operating motor vehicles at all time for all of us that are coming and going this week. And just as importantly, we ask our ancestors to please stand with us here today, infuse us, enthuse us with the understanding, respect, and sacrifices that were made on our behalf so that we may be here today on this sacred land. Creator, we are the stewards of this land. We ask for your input and guidance towards a proper resolution with Mother Earth. She's being assaulted from all angles and directions. And it's important that every soul within the hearing of my voice be enthused with this understanding that it is us that needs to bring this change of positivity back to the forefront of our communities. So I ask, Creator, that you enthuse these people individually and collectively and bring them forth today for their love of land. With that, I say aho. Thank you, everyone. So I first would like to acknowledge the people that put together this conference. There are a couple of individuals from our tribal environmental department that I'd like to bring out and also acknowledge. The first is Ray Turan. He is the coordinator of our environmental program, so thank you, Ray Turan. Also, the three individuals this morning who helped put together this conference on behalf of the Viejas tribal community. Sophia, I see you. Why don't you stop and wave? There's Sophia. Alongside her, out in front, is Christina, and of course, Mia and Bryce. When I was informed of the theme of this conference, love this land that we love, it speaks to us in this community. I think it's very evident to you all as you arrived in this valley this morning and also yesterday that the Valley of Viejas has been blessed with good abundance of land and also the people that are living in it. More importantly, our history. As you came here, heading east, or when you leave, heading west, you will see a body of water to the north. That body of water is actually where our home ancestral lands and villages were located, Captain Grande, and also a little bit further up the valley, Conejos. It is those two villages that were sacrificed by our community, the Kumeyaay village, so that the city of San Diego could have a reservoir known today as El Cap Reservoir, a body of water for their and everyone's well-being. The proceeds from that sale of land to the city of San Diego was utilized for the purpose of the land that you see today and where the Viejas Valley is. It was purchased from the Baron Long, who was a horse trading, gambling entrepreneur, and fortuitous, I might say. 1934, our people came up from that valley down there, and during a very harsh first initial winter or 2-3 years, pneumonia became a problem for our community as well as exposure. We did not have buildings that we were accustomed to, that we were living in the valleys before we moved up on here on the reservation land that we purchased. We had to dismantle outbuildings and fence lines and cut down several trees for us to build shelter and also create warmth. This is a harsh, enduring existence initially for our people, but we prospered because the land was our being and our identity. And so, with that being said, I ask all of you, when you go back to your communities, think about, if you haven't already, and then share the story with others as well, of the commitment and sacrifices that have done for your communities and what we all need to do collectively for each other going forward. So I want to commend every attendee today. I'm so impressed by the amount of people that have arrived. I hope that you find the accommodations at Viejas Casino and Resort accommodating and pleasing to your tastes. And I look forward to a successful and a productive and resolution to this conference. And if I may say, I look forward to helping the next tribe and the next community next year for the next conference. To you all, have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Woods. It's really important that we can understand the history of the lands where we're visiting, and it's always an honor to hear that from the Indigenous folks. Now we're going to have Blue Eagle Vigil of the Viejas Band of Kumeyaay and the Kumeyaay Singers.
Mics are hot. Good morning. Kumeyaay kamahan. How can yash bahip shu? Nuichihi matarwa mamaikopai. My name is Blue Eagle Vigil, and I'm from this land right here. I was asked to come and share a little bit of our songs. I'll be sharing with you some of our songs in our language. They're called Takuk, and Takuk is a little bird who's telling the story of our creation and other things in life that we'll see and that we'll go through. Forgive me, my voice ain't too good. We had a death over the weekend and we were singing all night, so do my best for you guys this morning. This is my son Eagle. He's gonna help me sing this morning. Ayo ho olo, kunyawe nyawe apeyo. 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 Ayo holo, 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 kunyawe nyawe apeyo. Te nai manga, te nai ma, te nai ma, te nai mangam. Te nai manga, te nai ma, te nai ma, te nai mangam. Te nai manga, te nai ma, te nai ma, te nai mangam. Te nai manga, te nai ma, te nai ma, te nai mangam. Te nai manga, te nai ma, te nai ma, te nai mangam. Te nai manga. Ate nai manga, te nai ma, te nai ma, ate nai manga. Urut aiwi atpa pawama, ate nai manga. Ate nai manga, ate nai manga, ate nai ma, ate nai manga. Urut aiwi atpa pawama, ate nai manga. Te nai manga, te nai ma, te nai ma, te nai manga. Te nai manga, te nai ma, te nai ma, te nai manga. Te nai manga, te nai manga, te nai ma, te nai ma, te nai manga. Urut paewi at papawama, te nai manga. Ayo holy marai quatemaleo, 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 ayo holy marai quatemaleo. Ayo holy marai quatemaleo, ayo holy marai quatemaleo, ayo holy marai quatemale, temale, temaleo, ayo holy marai quatemaleo, ayo holy marai quatemaleo, ayo holy marai quatemaleo. Ayo holy marai quatemale, temale, temaleo. Ayo holy marai quatemaleo. 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 Ayo holy marai quatemale, temale, temaleo. Ayo holy marai quatemaleo. Amo que quamayo welem, ayamo que quamayo welem. 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 Amateurs. Thank you, everybody. Let's have a good day.
Thank you, Blue Eagle. Thank you for representing in a good way, as always. And now we're going to bring Deputy Regional Administrator EPA Region 9, Cheree Peterson.
For shorter people, you always have to adjust the mic. Good morning and welcome to the 31st Annual Tribal and EPA Region 9 Conference. We're all so excited to be here. But first, before I say anything else, I would like to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered on the lands of the Viejas band of the Kumeyaay Indians, one of the remaining 12 bands of the Kumeyaay Indian Nation, which resides on a 1,600-acre reservation in the Viejas Valley, east of the community of Alpine, San Diego County, California. On these lands we are gathered today, we honor the Kumeyaay who have stewarded this land through generations. I want us all to respectfully honor all of their contributions through these generations. I want to pay my respects to elders past and present. Thank you so much for hosting us. I realize my face is new to almost all of you. Actually, probably everybody except the people who work for me. So thank you so much for indulging me and listening to me. I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I'm remembering as I stand up here, about a year ago, I attended the American Indian Society of Engineering and Science and was so impressed and learned so much from their keynote speaker, Bird Running Water. The lessons that I took there, I took to my office and bring with me to EPA. I have had over a 20-year career in the federal government, ending primarily in focusing on construction of federal infrastructure in navigation, flood damage reduction projects, environmental restoration projects, as well as my last few years that I spent overseeing and leading the construction of new medical facilities for our nation's veterans. Yesterday was my first day at an RTOC, and I'm very grateful to Laura Ebert and Roman Orono, our chairman, for guiding me through this process. Yesterday at the RTOC, EPA heard loud and clear many of the concerns that you have, and I'll address a few of them today as I am able. And we also spoke specifically about climate change and the effects of extreme weather that are happening to all communities, but often hard-hit local Indigenous communities. With more people in attendance today, I want to reiterate in this past month, we launched the latest climate pollution reduction grants competition, making $4.6 billion available to fund state, local, and tribal programs and policies that cut climate pollution, advance environmental justice, and deploy clean energy solutions. I understand well from yesterday and also from our participation at the National Tribal Conference last week that this program, as well as others, create many challenges. And we're interested in learning more and how we can create a better system for people applying and administering our grants. Our work on climate change goes hand in hand with our work in environmental justice. I do want to clarify that EPA does not consider tribes communities with environmental justice concerns. However, the environmental justice programs that have been created recently provide unique tools that may address some of the challenges that tribes are facing. With this administration's heightened support for environmental justice, the EPA has seen an unprecedented influx of funding for environmental justice concerns. We will soon roll out the Inflation Reduction Act-funded Climate Justice Community Change Grants Program and the Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program to benefit Region 9 communities, including tribal governance, in partnership with community-based organizations. As was clearly articulated at the RTOC yesterday by your representative and leaders, there are challenges both with applying for federal grants and administering federal grants. In part to address that, EPA has created technical assistance centers throughout the nation. EPA Region 9 is hosting 2 Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, or EJ TIC-TACs, because the other name is really long and even I have to read it. So we're excited to have these, we are excited to host 2 TIC-TACs, one in California and one in Arizona. The first one in San Diego State University and the second at the University of Arizona. I'm very pleased to say that today and through the week, the San Diego State University Center for Community, Energy, and Environmental Justice TIC-TAC is attending this conference and has an exhibition booth right outside and is ready and happy to provide as much technical assistance as possible. They have information specific to tribal concerns and are willing and hopeful that you will come to their exhibition booth. I know that on-time financial awards are important to tribes, and I'm pleased to note that EPA awarded 323 assistant agreements, issuing $72 million in funding across 26 environmental programs to tribes for work in fiscal year 2023. We're proud to say that of that $72 million, $10.9 million was funded through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Grant Program, and $8.1 million was funded through the Inflation Reduction Act. As I mentioned earlier, yesterday's plenary session at the RTAC made it clear that EPA needs to reduce barriers on a number of our programs. We need to look at reducing or changing the kind of reporting that we require, and we need to look creatively at how we are using the current financing and authorities that we have. I can assure you that Regional Administrator Guzman, myself, Laura Ebert, who leads our tribal program, as well as the rest of our team, are very interested in making this process smoother and easier for all tribes. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge that 2 weeks ago, we celebrated Indigenous People Day, recognizing the contributions of Indigenous people throughout the United States, celebrating their rich and diverse peoples within the United States, their cultures, histories, and traditions. President Biden issued a proclamation to honor the perseverance and courageousness of Indigenous people to show our gratitude for your myriad of your contributions. Here in EPA Region 9, we are committed to fulfilling our mission to protect human health and the environment, advancing environmental justice, equity, and building strong connections with tribal nations and Native Hawaiians. As a very recent and somewhat tragic example of our willingness and, I would say, a specific pointed effort to do this was the result of the tragic fires in Maui, specifically in Lahaina and in Upper Kula. EPA emergency responders were on the ground about 2 days after the fire. We went there with our normal mission of removing household waste, but with the new determination to do our normal work with greater deference to the cultural heritage, particularly in Lahaina. We went about this by meeting early on with cultural leaders, including their respected elder council called the Kapuna, which Administrator Guzman and myself have also met with. As a result of these meetings and intense development of how we can best serve, the Kapuna and their associates are leading cultural training for every EPA member and contractor who goes into the Lahaina fire zone. It has been so well received that now all the other federal agencies are requiring their folks to also go through this training. Also, as part of this, we developed a blessing every day called in Hawaiian is called the pule, which is a blessing to try and safeguard both the physical, spiritual, and emotional safety of those going to the Lahaina fire zone, which I can assure you is a very challenging thing to do. I'm also very pleased to say that every team that goes in there from EPA and that will go in there for future agencies will have a Native Hawaiian culturally trained monitor to address every single one of the 1,601 parcels that were burned in Lahaina, to make sure we are marking and showing deference to any cultural areas or ancestral markings so that we make sure that those are preserved going forward in whatever recovery will look like for Lahaina. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge all the folks who have given so much to this conference. I know the speaker before me acknowledged a few folks. I want to also acknowledge them. First of all, many thanks to the Viejas. This is a lovely facility. Marriott could learn from the wonderful beauty of these rooms. I'm so impressed. I specifically want to recognize from the Viejas planning team, Sophia, Christina, Bryce, and Mia. Let's please give them a hand. I know they planned this event under particularly challenging circumstances, and your perseverance and commitment are shining through. I would also like to thank EPA staff who supported this effort. Every year, the tribal branch of EPA Region 9, our Tribal Intergovernmental and Policy Division, work with the conference co-sponsors to make this as successful as we can. In particular, I'd like to thank Jeanette Sessick and Sophia Uso, who have worked so closely with the Viejas planning team. Finally, thanks must go to all of you. There was an overwhelming amount of interest in this conference. There were so many applications, not just to attend, but also for presentations. The planning team had to make some very difficult decisions about which presentations to include. We hope you bring that enthusiasm to all these sessions, and I encourage you to go to as many as you possibly can while finding time to take part of some of the available things to purchase. I know I'm going to do that during lunch. I hope you all enjoy this conference. Please take advantage of the companionship and friendship with your colleagues. I very much look forward to all the sessions I'm going to be able to go to. And before I close, I'd like to introduce, we have a special guest from EPA headquarters. His name is Kenneth Martin. He is the director, might be principal director, of our American Indian and International Office. Please welcome Kenneth.
Bonjour, everyone. Before I begin, I would like to associate myself with the remarks that Cheree made about thanking everyone from the Viejas band, from the EPA team, from the RTALK members that have contributed to putting on a successful conference. We all know how difficult it is to herd the cats and to put all of this stuff together. So I genuinely want to share my thanks to all of the supporting staff and teams that are out there who help put this conference together. It's critically important, and I'm just so grateful for you. So thank you. I'd like to thank the Region 9 RTALK for inviting me out here for this week, and for Region 9 for the invitation as well. I'm very excited. This is my first time out here on behalf of EPA. I joined the agency just a few months ago in April. Before that, I served for a very long time, 19 years in the United States Senate in various roles for different committees. I worked for the Indian Affairs Committee. I worked for the Environment and Public Works Committee. I also served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Tribal Government Affairs at the United States Department of Transportation under the Obama administration. And I mention all of that just because I want you to know that I have all of this government experience. And I'm not from EPA. So I'm new coming into the agency. I'm also an enrolled tribal member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Indians of Wisconsin, present-day Wisconsin. But I grew up in the Menominee Reservation where my mother was enrolled, and that's where we called home. So I'm not only, you know, I have this background in government, but I'm also a tribal member. So I bring that experience with me to senior leadership at EPA. I think, you know, when I think about my role at EPA headquarters, my job is to ensure that the EPA does the best work that it can to uphold its trust responsibility and respect tribal sovereignty to our Indian tribes. I think that is chiefly among all of the things that I do, that is the most important thing that I do. And sometimes it involves me screaming at senior leadership to make sure that we're including Indian country in everything that we do. And just making sure that Indian country isn't an afterthought when we're developing policies or we're committing actions. It's just that we need to make sure that Indian country is at the forefront of what we're doing. The work that we're doing right now, it's critically important. We all know, and you all know firsthand, the effects of what's happening in your communities, either that have been longstanding issues or if they're new effects or new threats because of the effects of global climate change. We have to ensure that this work is taking place. That the work that you're doing is in conjunction with the work we're doing at EPA. But that work isn't a one-way street. It shouldn't be EPA telling tribes what to do. It's a partnership. It's a two-way street. Tribes need to have a seat at the table, and I think that's my role, is to ensure that there's a tribal voice at senior leadership at the EPA. I didn't really have a lot of talking points today, but I did want to mention that. I really wanted to just use this time to introduce myself, let you know that I am at the agency. My door is always open. I'm a resource. My role is to, again, to just make sure that we're doing the best that we can to uphold our trust responsibility to Indian country. So with that, I'll exit and thank you. And thanks again to the Region 9 RTALK for inviting me, and thanks again for EPA. I appreciate all of you. I'll be here all week, so if you want to chat, please just pull me aside. I'm happy to do that. Thank you. Miigwech.
Okay, thank you. And if you can look at either one of these screens, we're going to offer a message from Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs.
Hi, I'm Governor Katie Hobbs. Although I couldn't join you in person, I'm so glad to have the opportunity to share this video with you. The theme of this year's conference, The Land We Love, could not be more fitting, as my administration has worked quickly to become better stewards of our land. Importantly, we are partnering with Arizona's 22 federally recognized tribes, nations, and communities in this effort. Most notably, earlier this year, I was proud to join Governor Stephen Lewis for the announcement of a historic water conservation agreement with the federal government to conserve water in the community. This demonstration of cooperation showed the entire country what's possible when we come together in good faith, and it really set the tone for what's to come out of all these partnerships. In addition to this agreement, I created the Governor's Water Policy Council, which is tasked with developing policy and legislative recommendations on how to best secure our water future. Tribal representation on this council was absolutely critical, and I'm proud to have Governor Stephen Lewis from the Gila River Indian community, Chairwoman Amelia Flores of the Colorado River Indian Tribes, Chairman Robert Miguel of the Alpine Indian community, and Maria Dagmar of the Intertribal Council of Arizona, all on the team. But we know that water isn't the only challenge facing our communities and our people today. That's why I established the first ever Office of Resiliency, where we have a full team working on issues from energy to land to transportation, ensuring the decisions we make are sustainable. This team works closely with my Office of Tribal Relations to seek guidance from those who have been stewards of this land and move Arizona forward together. In less than a year as governor, I have had the privilege of visiting several tribal communities across the state. I've been able to see firsthand in unique ways each tribe has cared for this land since time immemorial, and have learned so much from their leadership. I want each of you to know that I understand the responsibility that has been given to me as governor to protect our land, our resources, and our futures. I am committed to working together to do that. I'm excited to hear about what comes out of the next few days of conversations and brainstorming. On behalf of the state of Arizona, I want to thank you for being trusted partners in this work. I'm confident that together we will be able to build an Arizona for everyone.
Okay, and now I am honored to bring up Executive Director for the Pyramid Lake Fisheries of the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe, Mervin Wright.
Bija Wama, good morning, everyone. I want to thank Cristina Torres to begin with here. She had asked me to be a keynote speaker, which will take place tomorrow. Get a little anxious here, I'm a little antsy, listening to the what was said already. It's getting me like, oh, I got to tell the folks about what's on my mind, what we're up against, our challenges that we face. I said a little bit yesterday, came to the plenary session, talked about our conviction, our commitment, our passion. That's instilled in us. Last night's video presentation that took place out here, Kumeyaay, and how they embrace the fire, and how the message originates from inside. And I talk about the four elements of life: the fire, our Mother Earth, the water, and the air. Those are the four elements of life. You take one of those elements away, you won't have life. And when you think about those four elements, it's what we are. The fire is that spark in our heart, that electrical spark that represents a fire. Our body is the Mother Earth, represents our Mother Earth. our body's made up of over 90% water. So the water is already with us. It's already part of us. It's us. And the air we breathe goes into our lungs and it becomes part of our blood system. So those 4 elements of life are with us at all times. And so when we think about what we do on behalf of the environment, environmental protection, that makes our connection. That's where our connection is. And at times when we deal with the bureaucracy and the political correctness, gotta be nice, I gotta stick to my script, you know, I've got orders to follow from Washington, D.C. I can't say what needs to be said because I have orders and limited authority. Those are things that we deal with. Our colleagues with the federal government, you know, they're there. We're supposed to be side by side, shoulder to shoulder, dealing with these issues. And I want to also thank the bird singers that were here this morning. And I am reminded, you know, of the teachings, our teachings. You know, some people will say, since time immemorial, you know, that's our beginning human existence. I go back a little further. In the time before humans, the animals, the fish, the birds, the plants, insects, they're the ones that controlled life. And we come along and we have to learn from them. They taught us and we learned how to communicate. We learned our languages. These songs that were sung this morning, that were shared this morning, reminded me. And we have, in our language, we have ways in communicating with some of those birds, especially in the springtime. We have songs that are resemblance of the way those birds communicate to us, so we communicate back. And so those are just things that you know is instilled in us. And I'll save the rest for tomorrow's keynote. But I asked Christina if I could introduce my colleague, we spent a lot of years working on the NAGPRA law, and we've been part of this work group on culturally unidentifiable. We started this work group years ago, decades ago, and you know, in our ways, there's no such thing as culturally unidentifiable. But these are terms that were made up by the federal government. And these were terms that we had to take on in order to repatriate our ancestral collections that were held hostage in museums. And they're still being held hostage in these museums. They're still being controlled in possession by the federal government and the federal agencies that are supposed to, you know, help us repatriate our ancestral collections. So Rebecca Tsosie, she is a professor, law professor at the University of Arizona. And without further, I'll introduce Rebecca Tsosie. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm so pleased and honored to be here. And I want to thank my colleague. I'll always think of him as Chairman, Mervin, right? That's who he was when we worked on the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act regulations many, many years ago. And what I really appreciated about Mervin was that even though the political challenges were very severe at that time, it was a very tense time, and the museum and archaeological community felt that they had a right to that whole category of ancestors that they deemed to be culturally unidentifiable. And Mervin Wright would go up there and speak to anybody, whether they were a senator, they were a commissioner, he would speak to the truth. And he had so much integrity and so much courage. So it was my honor as a law professor. At that time, I was executive director of the Indian Legal Program at ASU. In Yaqui on my dad's side, that tribe is from Arizona and Sonora, Mexico, trans-border. But he really guided us. And so I view my responsibility as a law professor working in federal Indian law, working on indigenous tribal law, and working on international human rights law applicable to indigenous people to basically give the legal platform for what it is that we have to uphold into the future. And I think this conference that brings together EPA, tribal environmental professionals and leaders, and state environmental professionals and leaders, I thank this group for coming together around these important things. And I know that Mervin Wright's been very important to this group. So right now, can you please join me in a round of applause for Mervin Wright? Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. And Jenna, do I have 10 or 15 or 20? 10 minutes? Okay. 20 minutes. Okay. I brought my clock so I wouldn't run over. And I thank everybody who spoke today and the beautiful songs that we had. This is a very powerful group. Cheree, Peterson, thank you so much for your leadership and for bringing your team together around those very important concepts. So what I want to talk about is the theme of this conference, which I think is very beautiful, the land that we love. And I want to say that for me, it represents a way of thinking. And this is what I tell my students, because I teach federal Indian law, but I tell them first day of class, what you have to do is to learn how to think critically about these issues and to be able to make the arguments that we need to make into the future. And when you think about colonialism, it started out at a physical level and there was a tremendous loss of life, and we suffer from that today, the tragedies, and that is part of NAGPRA's history. Then there was this idea of colonizing the mind, educating, assimilating, making us into them. Now we've been through those two full cycles, but today the world is very tricky because it operates at the level of thought. What are you thinking? What frameworks of thought do you think is normal, is right, is good to do the work that you have to do? And each one of you in this room does very important work. I am so honored to be here talking to you, and I thank you for your dedication and commitment. So the world that we live in terms of this US dominant society, says that land, water, food, energy, forest is resources, and resources serve human needs. And if you own the resource, if you own the land, then you have a whole bunch of rights that people that don't own the land don't have. The way that we are instructed, and I really love that film trailer from yesterday. Thank you so much to the filmmaker and everybody who participated in that. But that's a totally different framework of thinking, right? That says we, as this indigenous community, Kumeyaay people, have a territory that we've always belonged to. And that territory, I was trying to look at the map, and when Chairman Woods was talking, I was trying to envision this, but there was no US-Mexico border. There was no California-Arizona border. That was a territory that was cared for by the people, and the land and the water and the forest, it all operates together. So when somebody asked last night, is the forest on tribal land or is it on federal land? That's a federal Indian law question, because somebody owns that land and has the power to control it. But if you thought about it as the territory that the Kumeyaay people belong to, they steward and govern all of it for all of the generations. That idea of intergenerational stewardship is pretty unique to Indigenous peoples, and that's what really sets them apart in terms of international human rights law. You won't find anything in US domestic law that secures the rights of future generations. There's language like that in NEPA, but nobody ever really applies it. but that is the ethic of Indigenous people. And there is a provision in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. There are two of them that I think are guiding lights for the work that you all do, that we do. Number one is sovereignty. Indigenous sovereignty is important because it is part of a larger moral and political right to self-determination, autonomy in self-governance on territory. That is the key to what it means to be an Indigenous people on a territory. Sovereignty is very important. Political sovereignty is exercised under US federal Indian law within the tribe's reservation and within a structure of government dominated by the US government. That's not the human rights framework. The human rights framework says Indigenous people, and this is Article 25 of that declaration, have the right to a spiritual relationship with the lands, territories, and waters that they have always occupied. Whether or not that's the reservation, it's their territory. And it is that right that operates for the benefit of the future generations in that article. And that was negotiated over 25 years with Indigenous peoples throughout the world. It is that right that each of you in this room protects and upholds. And that is the right that affords a seat at the table. Ms. Peterson talked about how the work is going in Hawaii. And I really appreciate that you brought that up. In Hawaii, as many of you know, Hawaii had a status as an internationally recognized kingdom, constitutional monarchy. It was toppled in 1893 by a group of US military insurgents, plantation owners. It was totally illegal. And that is what got annexed into the US as a territory and then as the state of Hawaii in 1959. The Native Hawaiian people don't have the same sovereign rights as federally recognized Indian tribes do. They don't have those rights. But what they have is cultural sovereignty. And cultural sovereignty, as one of my colleagues on the NARF board, when we were together on that board, Chairman Wallace Coffey at that time of the Comanche Nation, and Mervin Wright also worked with Chairman Coffey. They worked together on the NAGPRA issues. But we wrote an article about cultural sovereignty because the Supreme Court got lost in what inherent sovereignty really means. The Supreme Court thinks it means jurisdiction, and they think that they could take it away and somehow that diminishes the sovereignty of an indigenous nation. It does not. Cultural sovereignty is the heart and soul of that nation stemming way back. And that's what the Native Hawaiian people have. That's what they uphold in their language, in their traditions, in their practices. As we saw in that film last night, the practices live on in that cultural knowledge. So cultural sovereignty is that process of repatriating the knowledge, the language, the wisdom, the land, the ancestors, to bring it back home. And that is what the love of the land means. It can be understood as that cultural form of sovereignty. The Native Hawaiian people also have a concept, aloha aina. I was invited there a couple of years ago to speak to them and about the land, about environmental issues, about climate. And they talked about this. Professor John Osorio in Native Hawaiian Studies talked about that principle of aloha aina, which means the love of the land. And he said it's that we recognize that everything's interdependent. The land feeds everything. And we take care of the land, but that's inclusive of the water. It's inclusive of the fish, and their marine resources right now are under tremendous jeopardy from pollution. And the fires in Maui were devastating. And that should never, never have happened on that land. It is because they are prevented from caring for it because of the private property ownership structure that Hawaii adopted after that, and the way that they disclaimed Native Hawaiian sovereignty over those lands in terms of full governance and management authority. That is what you are defending right here and right now, because federally recognized Indian tribes here do have that power. They have the power to govern. They have the power to regulate. These cooperative arrangements with federal and state governments are critically important, and they are a product of that very important recognition of political sovereignty. Now, I want to turn to something that I would like you to think about going forward, and that is how this structure that we have that protects lands, waters, fish, wildlife, forests within that domestic dependent paradigm that they have, how that is currently under jeopardy because of the thinking of the United States Supreme Court. And this is something that I would ask you to affirm in your tribal law codes and structures to the extent that it is possible, because the traditional knowledge and the traditional law operates from way back, but sometimes it isn't codified in the written law, and therefore it may be invisible to others, external to the community. But by defining the importance, the values that are associated with land, water, fish, resources, you set a different place at the table in terms of a consultation, in terms of those intergovernmental relationships. So the United States Supreme Court is a little bit confused right now, because the domestic dependent nation paradigm of federal Indian law is a trust model. And they feel that they have power over the trust part of that model. The power over the sovereignty part was the jurisdictional rulings, for example, Alpine, no criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians, Montana, that line of cases. But the attack on the trust responsibility is much more subtle. And I saw that this summer when they decided the Arizona versus Navajo Nation case, which was really about whether the Navajo Nation had the right to have the US government do an equitable accounting of what their water rights are on the Colorado River. They have an 1868 treaty. And by the way, as many of you know and defend, tribal water rights can date to time immemorial. If it is there to preserve a fishery, and they've had that fishery since time immemorial, the priority date is time immemorial. So it's very important to do a correct accounting in terms of data priority and the acreage, for example, on that 1868 reservation. Their rights in Arizona are not yet quantified. In fact, half of Arizona's federally recognized Indian tribes do not have final adjudications of their water rights. That is very dangerous because the water in the Colorado River, as we all know, has declined drastically. And the agreement that was referenced in terms of Governor Hobbs, when she referenced that drought contingency plan and Gila River's commitment, they would not have been able to make that commitment if they didn't have a final adjudication of their water rights. And I think they were not part of the discussion in the early years, but when it came time to drought contingency planning, they were the ones that made that agreement go through. So this is very, very important. But the Supreme Court said this summer that there was no trust responsibility that could make the US government do anything to help the Navajo people access their water rights. That the water rights, are they trust resources? How many people think yes? Raise your hand if you think yes. You're right. They are trust resources because reserved water rights attach as of the date of creation of the reservation. They've always been there ever since that treaty reservation was created. But the accounting makes it visible to the world. The Supreme Court said it's like developing land. The US government has no obligation to develop tribal land, so why should it have an obligation to afford access to the water rights? So what is the remedy of the Navajo people? The Supreme Court said they can go to court and ask to join. They already went to court and asked to join. In 1960s, in the 1970s, they got shut out by the federal government that said, we as trustee will take over. But now the door's open because it's 2023. That is the kind of thinking that is going to get us in trouble, because there are cases pending in the United States Supreme Court on cert that deal with the arguments of irrigation users, that somehow the amount of water that is being allocated by Bureau of Reclamation to maintain fisheries, to maintain these very important purposes that serve tribal communities and have served them forever, that those should not be protected by law, and they're challenging tribal sovereign immunity in those cases. So it is a very dangerous time right now legally. And I just want to leave you with the idea that what was wrong in the thinking that led us to this point is an oppositional litigation dynamic where federal and state interests are at odds, and where the tribes are caught in the middle of that. Are their rights the same as those of the federal trustee? No, but they can be mistaken for federal rights. And that's happening, I believe, with the reading of Waters of the United States after the United States Supreme Court's recent decision in the Sackett case narrowed the construction of waters of the United States, meaning more water is under state control than under federal control, and tribal rights fit under the federal part of that. So it is something to be mindful of, but the way of thinking that leads to survival, and I really appreciate Mervin Wright's conception of that, the elements that lead to life, they generate energy, they generate food. Those are things that human beings steward and depend on. We won't have any of that, for example, in the Colorado River, if we don't come together in the way that Governor Hobbs said. And that means to be very mindful about what is the tribal position, to make sure that that is front and center and represented in every single one of those meetings as distinctive. And that is what is going to carry us into the future in the way that we need to survive. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Where I come from, we call that spitting game. Thank you both so much. I'm going to invite you all just for a second to close your eyes, place your hand over your heart, your left hand over your heart. Take a deep breath in through your nose, welcoming in all the love that surrounds and pulling that love into the body, releasing any tension and blowing that out through your mouth, releasing that tension. Again, breathing in through the nose, that unconditional love which surrounds us, and allowing that love to be felt in the entire being. Imagining that love hugging every cell in the body, allowing us to be healthy, loved, and healed. And go ahead and exhale. And you can open your eyes. I'm now going to call up Carmen Lucas, who is Kumeyaay Laguna Indian from Laguna Mountain, San Diego, and has been a student of her Indian heritage throughout her life. She currently serves as an appointed member of the California Truth and Healing Council.
Oh, thank you. Hey, this is a little spooky. I'm the only one here with white hair. I'm kind of talking to a different generation. I'm 88 years old. So yeah, hurrah for me. Thank you. I think it's appropriate. I want to make sure, number one, that you can all hear me. Can you in the back hear me clearly? Thank you. With old age comes a lot of handicaps. One is my hearing. At any rate, I'm going to do the best that I can, but I would like to introduce myself in a traditional manner. My name is Carmen Lucas. I'm a Kumeyaay Indian from Laguna Mountains here in San Diego County. I am the great-granddaughter of Susana Calich. I am the granddaughter of Maria Alto, and I am a daughter of Tom Lucas, all from Laguna Mountains. And that's why I'm here today. We are the last of our people of the old Laguna Indian Reservation, which is now private property. It has a very unique, interesting history. I'm not going to talk about that today, but what I would like to do is thank Viejas for allowing me to come and speak to you today. I don't have really enough time. I have so much to say, as you might imagine, in 88 years. I'm very critical of the process, which I will touch on. I remember Viejas when they were just becoming a reservation. My father worked for the Indian Service, so we were involved in part of that. We watched as things matured and changed. I remember coming to the casino when they first opened up. They had a live Indian actually at the door to greet you and say good morning, and you could buy a cheese omelet for $1.50. Things have changed. I did not know that Viejas had two hotels. One is a Willows and another one in the building. So you can tell this is very different times and very different generations. So I like to remind people of that because my perspective is often a result of my many years of being alive and active and interacting with people. So with that, I want to also acknowledge my ancestors. I think we would all agree none of us would be here without their tenacity, without their intellect, without their moral courage, and standing for their rights. We have the privilege and the honor to recognize those people, and I say thank God for them. I would also like to acknowledge my attorney, Courtney Ann Coyle. If I've had any success in the work that I do in the last 30 years, it has been because of Courtney, so thank you. Thank you for being here, Courtney. The land we love, you know, that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. I'm not that familiar with the national preservation environmental laws, but I do know that I'm going to have to turn my light on here because that also comes with old age, is you can't see well enough to read your script, and you all make me so nervous that I need to pay attention to it. So it's not going to help. Okay, sorry about that. I do know that the National Environmental Law requires the agencies to take a hard look at the, at the programs that they're designing to see what kind of impacts will have to their projects in the environment. I think the most important thing about that, because it's hard to understand, what do you really mean, take a hard look? For me, it's consultation. I cannot stress enough as to how important consultation is. I've been asked to explain to you, how does the land we love guide me in my life experiences with the land and the natural resource issues? That's a hard question to answer, and I'm not sure that I can. It's entirely too complicated, but that's what life is all about, especially in this country. We still have choices. We still have freedoms to make those choices. My work as a Native American monitor here in San Diego County and in Imperial Valley has been both rewarding and heartbreaking. I would like to touch on a few things that I've learned as a Native American monitor and the process. In my view, and you're not going to like this, especially if you're government employees, but in my view, the most harmful ingredient, the process of land development, was the wedge that the United States government placed between the federally recognized Indians and the non-federally recognized Indians. I think that is so harmful. In the process, I'm sure you all know, but for anybody who does not know, please understand the conversation, and this is in consultation, begins with the environment. It starts with the knowledge of the land we love and the elements therein that we cannot live without. You've already heard what those are. Again, I cannot stress enough on how important the conversation is during the consultation process. Again, it must be honest. The state parks archaeologist once told me, well, I consulted with you. I don't have to do what you want. That may be true, but for me, her attitude was showing, as far as I'm concerned, it's my understanding that the information that the Native Americans provide in consultation must be part of the weight in the final decision to that process and that development that's going to happen. Over time, as a Native American monitor, I've become familiar with buzzwords from the agencies, the city, the county, and the cultural resource management business. The first one was really a puzzle for me on La Jolla Shores. It's a project that they declared a negative declaration. What in the hell does that mean? I'm standing there as a monitor watching the unpleasant excavation of a 9,000-year-old inhumation on a project called Negative Declaration. Needless to say, I had a lot of questions, and that's when I had to get my attorney involved. And we had a lot of questions to ask and a lot of things to resolve. The next one was mitigation. What does that mean? I guess I should have told you beforehand. Be prepared. I'm not an intellect. Okay, I'm just an Indian off the street, but I am not stupid. And so we would throw these buzzwords out with mitigation. What does that mean? I thought it meant a license to rape all the cultural resource projects in San Diego, our history. And then they changed it to can be mitigated to less than significance. That's a little classy, but what does that really mean? It means that the archaeologist gets to excavate 1 to 5% of an archaeological site. How many conversations I had with my boss asking him, how do you know whether or not you're in the heart of the site? You don't. So many times we miss identifying the human remains beforehand. The mitigation for the archaeologists who are allowed to dig 1 to 5% may help them in their so-called scientific studies, but it doesn't benefit the Indian community. My favorite question to all of them for over 30 years has been, what makes that all right? I'll probably go to my grave without that question being answered. My next question was, does the Indian community know that their history, as it was written by our ancestors in the earth, is being erased? I'm not sure that I've got a clear answer on that either. And I would ask, again, when did we become scientific studies? or specimens. Indians, and it has been said that Indians have been compelled, even against their strongest spiritual protest, to dig up ancestor remains to make way for the needs of dams and the needs of the greater society. Today, 100 years later, us American Indians are still being pushed to the wall to dig up our ancestor remains to make room for development. They call that an inadvertent discovery. In Southern California, there is no such thing. There are so many Indians that have lived in Southern California. You cannot go any place in this state without knowing there are Indians still here who are the lineal descendants of those folks who have occupied this land. Again, I must remind you, I don't speak for the Indian community, but for me, it is a spiritual violation to have to dig up our ancestor remains. I think that's good. Okay, you'll pardon me, I'm not used to all this. And I guess my goal today is recognizing that this one little Indian has been given the opportunity this late in life to talk to an audience that is much younger than I am. And you're probably all highly educated intellects, but you have the power. You have the power, and don't let anybody ever take that away from you. You have the power to change things. There is no reason in this world why Indians have to continue to dig up their ancestral remains to make way for development. I'm sorry, but that touches my core. I just find that a spiritual violation, a most hideous act to have to do that. We will do it, and then we have a ceremony because we think that's the right thing to do. But I think the time has come where the right thing to do is find a better alternative. So it seems to me that in these modern times, developers should be required to employ the forensic canine dogs who have been trained to locate antique ancestral remains with the help of Native American monitors and archaeologists on that first pedestrian survey on land that is planned for development, and then design the project. I'm not opposed to development. I understand that puts peanut butter on the bread for a kid's lunch and buys them shoes. I just think we can do it more intelligently. And if you know where those ancestor remains are, we must avoid them. We cannot continue to violate them. Again, I'd like to touch, or I want to touch, I'm out of that part there. I want to touch about the agencies and cumulative effects. Cumulative effects. Oh, God, the agencies. I'm sorry, but I get a little fired up now and then. This is a long sequence of events, and I know you probably might get bored, but please hear me out. Don't go to sleep. If you see somebody yawning, poke them. I just think this issue is so important, and I may never get another chance to talk to you. So I want you to understand, here in San Diego County, we have an outfit called the San Diego Gas and Electric Company. They told San Diego that they needed to build a new power line a number of years ago. With that came a number of substations. I was told that every kid has an electronic toy. It takes a substation to run that toy. The Bureau of Land Management and SDG&E and McCain Valley. McCain Valley, if you're not familiar with San Diego's backcountry, is east of here. It is one of the richest cultural resource areas in San Diego County. The lead agency was Bureau of Land Management, who has known forever the rich cultural resources in McCain Valley, to include the ancient human remains. McCain Valley has the trails that lead down from the mountains or out of the desert up into McCain Valley, travels through McCain Valley and further into Mexico. There is no mistake. This was a pre-contact historical travel trail of our people. For years, the Bureau of Land Management spent thousands of dollars on cultural resource management surveys in McCain Valley. They knew of those resources. They knew of those ancestor remains. In spite of that, and I would like to say that they also designated McCain Valley as a preserve. However, when the power lines came through, they changed it to a recreation area, apparently to make way for the power lines and what was to come. What came after that was the huge windmills. You've all seen these great big things that we're calling energy. With the windmills in McCain Valley came the widening of the old pre-contract trail, which is now covered with gravel. Big boulders, and you know, some of these boulders are some of our animals like bears that were frozen in time. Some of our old people were frozen in time with boulders. And I remember speaking to the applicant saying, we need time to identify these big boulders. And he looked at me and he says, you had your chance. So some of these big boulders were blown up. And with that came a 3,000 RPM eradicator attached to a bobcat. It chewed up the brush and live 500-year-old oak trees, all in the name of development. McCain Valley, as I once knew it, is no more. The SDG&E power line moved into Jacumba, which is just kind of southeast of McCain Valley. They put in a substation there. Hundreds of pre-contact cultural hearths were destroyed. Fortunately, the Native American monitors insisted on dates. I am of the understanding that there is a continuum of dates in Jacumba Valley to 6,800 years. That's terribly important to the Kumeyaay people because our legends tell us we have been here since the beginning of time. And when you touch on NAGPRA and you talk about repatriation of human remains, the University House in La Jolla held 9,006-year-old human remains that the Kumeyaay Repatriation Committee had to fight for years to repatriate because the scientists kept saying, we're not the same people. Well, that's foolish, absolutely foolish. So these dates are terribly important. On every project I work, I ask, can we get dates? From the solar or the power plant, very quietly next to it came a solar plant. I'm told that ancestors' remains were also removed from there. And again, not one blade of grass grows under those solar plants. It is pure naked soil. The SDG&E power line moved into the desert floor and a substation was built there as well. And again, the lead agency was the Bureau of Land Management. The Bureau of Land Management gave the okay for the placement of these huge windmills. The cement and the rebar that is placed in the ground to hold up these huge 125-acre windmills or 125 windmills is unimaginable. I will say, and I'd like to applaud the biologists that worked on that project. They did their very best to save the little lives of the little animals. One of those was a red, white, and black snake, and I believe we call those a king snake here in California. It had been pushed into a cactus, and poor little thing, had the thorns all over it. The biologist took that snake, placed it on a white towel, and they removed every one of those thorns. I don't know if that snake lived or not, but I do know that the biologists did their life to help it, did their best to help it. They did their best to save the iguanas and every other little animal before the big earth removers got to them. And I can't say enough about those biologists and how hard they worked on that. However, like many other Indians, I have known Ocotillo Wells as the Valley of the Dead. Many of our ancestors go through places like that. Again, the numerous impacts to the cultural resources, to include the desecration of a small shrine by an employee of SDG&E, the destruction to the view shed, and later the archaeologist from BLM said, oh yeah, it does look horrible. At nighttime, it looks like a red light district. The power line in Ocotillo Wells and the damage that has been done out there can never be corrected. And then there's the Cleveland National Forest and the SDG&E Wood to Steel project. The Forest Service Historic Property Management and Treatment Plan requires identification and evaluation of potential traditional cultural properties. In 2016, one TPC was identified in Campbell. It is called the Singing Rock. To my understanding, the Cleveland National Forest to date has yet to send that document to SHPO. I don't know why. The other thing that we discovered in Laguna Mountains was another TPC. And again, it was a struggle for a number of years, but again, without the help of the attorney, it wouldn't have happened. But in 2023, because of the collective team that worked on this was a multidisciplinary team, the archaeologists and our attorney and myself and a few other people were able to put the document together. Thank you. And it was finally recognized a few months ago. And even the Forest Service had to acknowledge that, yes, this is a traditional cultural properties. So what does that mean? Hopefully it means that the Forest Service has to handle their development in the forest with a little bit more grace and dignity. But I don't know that that's true. Okay. These agencies together have created a cumulative ugliness, in my opinion, in San Diego's backcountry and Imperial Valley. My understanding is you create an ugly environment, you create an ugly society. My reflection on these projects is that although some of us Indians were at the consulting table, many of us really didn't understand the process or what was going to happen. I do believe today that both SDG&E and the Bureau of Land Management and even the Forest Service were less than open about these projects and what was to come in cumulative effects. Did they take a hard look at the environment and the damage that would be done to their projects? I don't believe so. Perhaps they were dedicated and geared by the green philosophy energy. What I just told you, like I said, was a long story, but it took years for that to really unveil and to see how this process really works. I have learned over the years that these projects drag on and drag on. Then you have a change of personnel. Everybody's on somebody's payroll, and it takes years. Am I running out of time? I don't want to run out of time. I think I've only got another 5 minutes or so because I want to switch gears now and hopefully tell you something that will help you in the decisions that you do. And again, I will apologize to you. I am old, and I'm looking at a crowd that's much younger than I am. So I know there's differences in generations. I know every generation does things differently. But I'm standing here as your elder, begging you, please find a better way to do this. We don't have to destroy our culture for development. Again, I apologize for my emotions, but damn it, I've earned it. Your ancestors earned it, and I'm here to speak for them. And thank you for that, by the way. I would like to say, for anybody who does not know, it has been said that one of the darkest episodes in American history is the devastation of the Native Indians, their population, their bloodline, the traditional cultural places, and the loss and desecration to Mother Earth. The land we love, our culture as an American Indians, has always been an intimate lifestyle with the land and the environment. Again, I don't speak for the Indian community. I can only tell you what I understand about my own Indian history. When you live in an environment for a long time, you become intimate with it. Living and growing up in my ancestors' homeland in the Laguna Mountains developed in me an understanding of the essence of place. We are the people of this land that we love. Our ancestors are highly intelligent people who understood the rhythm of this environment and moved with it without destroying it for thousands of years. When I was a little girl, my father led the way down the desert path. The desert path is our pre-contact trail from Laguna Mountains down to the desert. My father pointed to the west and he said, the main part of the old trail is over there. Years later, in 2001, after the Pines Fire, I hiked down the desert path to access the damage to the cultural resources. As I looked at the burned landscape, there just where my father had said it was, in all its nakedness lay our desert path. I cannot help but wonder how many of our ancestors walked that trail for how many years to have left such an imprint in the earth 100 years later. The desert path drops in elevation from 5,500 to sea level, that's feet. The change in elevation offers a variety of environments that accommodate our needs. The smell of sage, cedar, pine are all in my memory bank. Over the years, as a United States Marine, I traveled halfway around the world, and I carried the cultural landscape with me and all those fragrances. The black nights, the Milky Way, I could always see the Milky Way. As I watched the flashes of light fly in and out of the Milky Way, I was reminded of when I was a little girl. I stood at a desert rock art site. My father pointed to a hash mark image painted on a large boulder. And he said, this is the way to the Milky Way. The spirits of our ancestors have come and gone from there. Water. You've already heard about water, but I'm going to tell you something a little differently. The sacred springs where water runs out of the ground, pure natural water, no man-made chemicals in it. The smell of water, the smell of, or the sound of gurgling water, the sound of bubbling mud pots are all among the most valuable sacred elements of life. The smell of water, the sound of gurgling water, the sound of bubbling mud pots are all among the most sacred elements of life. I can't say that strongly enough. The mud sulfur springs, the hot mineral waters, have been medicine for our people since the beginning of time. The old medicine people told us the land is alive. The land is alive. The heart of the fire is Mother Earth. The heart of the fire within is the Mother Earth. This is in reference to the geothermal springs and the geothermal geysers, which appear to have the earth breathe, or it looks like the earth is breathing. Such mud pots and steam are right here in our ancient Lake Kumeyaay, the Salton Sea, in Southern California, Colorado Desert, a TCP, Traditional Cultural Properties, which is under threat by the geothermal plants and by lithium extraction. Congress has said preserving important historic culture and aspects of our nation constitutes an important goal. Is that just lip service? The land we love is not being made anymore. It is non-renewable. In my view, the American Indian culture lifestyle has always been an important ingredient to this nation. I'd like to repeat that. In my view, the American Indian culture and lifestyle has always been an important ingredient to this nation. You won't hear that on the 4th of July. If you don't remember anything else I've said this morning, please remember the fire within, the heartbeat of Mother Earth. This land deserves our collective dedication to identifying, protecting, and preserving a healthy environment for all of us and for those who have yet to be born. Thank you. You're giving me goosebumps. You're giving me goosebumps. Thank you so much. I would just like to say that I'm happy to answer questions. I just have so much to say. I will be here for the 3 days. If any of you have an urge or a care to talk to me, please do. And again, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you once again to Carmen. I was blessed to meet her just a couple days ago, and the things that she did not share, but others were bragging about her, she's an amazing woman. So I do encourage you to talk to her as she offered. We do have some housekeeping. Oh, well, first and foremost, there are currently 550 registered peoples here today. So round of applause for that. Some housekeeping for you all is that the room breakout sessions currently in the Oak Ballroom BC are Oak Ballroom A is on the other side of the divider, and then Sycamore and Willow rooms are downstairs. There will be self-serve lunch, and it'll be provided just outside the Oak Ballroom, and there are plenty of restaurants to eat at in the casino and in the outlet center just across the street. The dining spaces are in Oak Ballroom A and the terrace just outside. Tribal EPA website has a carpool sign up on the travel page. So to coordinate rides to and from airport, you can reach that. If you need a shuttle to or from Sycuan Casino Resort, please see the schedule in the blue on the agenda overview. There is only one shuttle in operation. Also, tonight is bowling night from 6 to 9 p.m. The bowling alley is in the outlet center across the street. And then tomorrow is karaoke and costume contest, which is located in Ballroom BC. Dress up. There will be prizes for the top 3 winners, 200 first place. But if you didn't bring a costume, roll up anyways, and let's have some fun. At the close of the conference, please return your badge holders and lanyards to enter the raffle. If you brought your own, you double your chances. And don't forget to grab your swag right outside if you haven't already. And then some quick thank yous before we send you on your way to the keynote speakers and to Blue Eagle, all the presenters that are in the breakout sessions, also to the sponsors, RES, Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, Hamul Indian Village, Paula Band of Mission Indians, Devil Mountain Wholesale Nursery, Morongo Band of Mission Indians, 29 Palms Band of Mission Indians, Saboba Band of Luiseño Indians, Akchin Indian Community, California Climate Investments, and Barona Band of Mission Indians. Also, San Diego Association of Governments, SANDAG, PepsiCo, San Diego Community Power, Environmental Center of San Diego, County of San Diego Office of Equity and Racial Justice, as well as Pachanga. Also, there are vendors and exhibitors just outside and downstairs, so please check them out. And with that, enjoy the rest of your couple of days here, and I will be with you probably bowling tonight, so I'll see y'all later. Thank you.